Hello.
Hello.
That was Up and Up by Coldplay. So welcome to No Laughing Matter with me, Jaya Baldwin.
And me, Ned Sanders.
Your favourite comedy show each week where we talk about an element of comedy, what makes it funny.
The only comedy show once a week where we talk about an element of comedy, what makes it funny.
Indeed. So today we will be talking about characters and stage personas in comedy, won't we, Ned?
Yes, we will. It's an idea which has been popular in comedy for a while. The idea that when you perform, you play a persona, so you play a character on stage who isn't yourself. Because a lot of people assume that when a comedian comes up and starts doing comedy, that they are themselves. But in many cases, that's not the case.
No, not at all. Why would you ever want to go on a stage being your boring old self?
None of us are interesting or funny in real life.
No. In fact,
It's a trade secret.
Ned is one of the most boring people I've ever met in real life.
Yeah. It's true.
So don't be fooled by comedians' seemingly clever, funny guises. No, but in all seriousness, it's a very important part of comedy, as nearly every single performer has one.
Yeah, well, one of the things I kind of want to talk about with this is where does the line between a stage persona, so like me coming on and acting more arrogant or acting more crazy than I am in real life on a stage, where do you draw the line between that and a character? So if I were to put on a mustache, use a German accent and call myself General Messinkauf or whatever, what's the difference between character comedy and a persona?
Well, I suppose for me, I would wager that, as a character, it is possible to still tell jokes in the same way that you would with a persona doing a normal stand-up set. But I think a persona is still very obviously grounded in you. A persona is not presented as a character. A persona is presented as yourself, whereas when you're doing a character, it's more obviously acting.
Yeah, I suppose the need for a persona comes... obviously you jokingly said that comedians are boring in real life, but I think the element of truth for that comes from no one is interesting enough to, in a comedy context, no one's interesting enough to go on stage and make someone laugh as purely themselves without exaggerating things and without pretending things and making things up.
Yes, exactly, really. I mean, it's just like real life. You never really tell that story to your friends in exactly the same way that it happened because...
Could you imagine if someone acted like a comedian on stage they'll be an awful, horrible person. That'd be so uncomfortable.
If someone took it to that extreme, yes. But I mean, if you think about it in real life, we are all sort of exhibiting personas a lot of the time, depending on who we're around, when and why. And I do think a lot of stand-up comedy is the art of storytelling. Sometimes it's the art of punditry or telling jokes and things like that. But a lot of it's storytelling.
It's using words, generally.
And we always embellish our stories to make them sound more interesting than they actually were.
Yeah.
Because, really all that happened was your mate dropped an ice cream on the floor and it was funny. But if you're like, oh, it was mental, mate. So we were at the ice cream shop, and, all the standard embellishments that apply.
There's one comedian I saw on Live at the Apollo a while ago. Cannot remember his name, unfortunately. But all he did was he told a story about one day when it was very cold and he saw a woman walking down the street and then she slipped and fell on the floor and people found it a bit funny because it was slapstick and she was clearly okay.
Yes.
And that is something which happens which would happen in real life and be quite funny. But It was just the way that he told it. There was no embellishment. It was just he told it in such a funny, clever way. So I suppose you can make mundane things funny without exaggerating them.
Yeah, it's very possible. Exaggeration and embellishment maybe aren't quite the correct words, but when you tell a story, you at the very least appropriate it to a format that will be best received by your listeners, viewers, whatever you want to call them, your friends that you're telling the story
audience,
to.
I suppose, yeah.
Your audience, yes. Which is exactly what you do as a comic, although you do it more specifically through a comedic lens, I suppose.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd also like to point out really quick that we don't have a guest today. It's just me and Jaya, so you're going to have to settle for our boring voices droning on.
Well, we just decided that we had to cut the fat from this show, and we decided that other people really weren't very important after all.
I personally don't like anyone other than Jaya in the world.
He doesn't even like himself, folks.
Yeah.
It's really that sad.
Yeah, I suggested taking me off the show, so it was just Jaya talking to himself. But
which, as we all know, would be the superior art form here, but that can't happen because
it would be a little bit sad. I mean,
apparently that's arrogant.
Oh God, I don't believe that. Don't believe that. for a second.
Right, we will now hopefully move on to leaving with you some more music. This should be Burn the Witch by Radiohead.
It's an amazing song, and it's their new song. I haven't done anything in ages, and I hope you enjoy.
Hello.
We're back.
That was Peanut Butter Jelly by Galantis.
A song which Jaya really wanted to play, and there was a look of childish glee on his face when it came on.
It's a nice little thing that I like. Something to do with my brother, who is Rudy Baldwin. Shout out to him. Why not? Anyway, this is No Laughing Matter with Jaya and Ned, as we are talking about character comedy today.
Well, and persona.
Personas. Stage personas. And so we were just going to talk a little bit about our own stage personas, because we're obsessed with talking about ourselves, but because it's a logical place to start a discussion. So yeah, I'll go first. Why not? So my persona on stage is actually quite a lot similar to real me, but possibly even more sort of over-exaggeratedly polite and things like that.
I seem to remember the first time I saw you perform. Well, in fact, it was the first time you performed. You were really, really nervous, and you were shaking and panicking. And when you went on stage, you kept that nervous energy and was a bit like, "Oh, I'm really nervous." And I feel like, I don't know if you're nervous every time you perform or if you've carried that on, but that I think is part of your character, because you take that on each time. And I don't know if you've subconsciously taken it on, or do you feel like you actively try to act more nervous than you are when you're on stage?
No, I don't think I try to actively act more self-conscious. To be fair, stand-up is still something I'm very new to. I'm much more comfortable with improvisation and standard acting. So I would wager that, I probably am more nervous doing that than I am when I'm performing other things. But whether it was part of my persona, the nervousness, I'm not sure. It might be an accidental byproduct. It might be a very real thing.
Okay. Do you feel like in any way that you do plan for what your character is going to be like? Oh, sorry, I keep saying character, but what you when you're on stage, do you plan for what you're going to do, how you're going to stand?
A little bit. I always try to sort of embody the characters that I'm performing, because I do utilize some sections of character comedy in my set. It's mostly ordinary stand-up, but then at times I will break away to do a silly voice for a character or an imitation or something like that.
That's storytelling. It gives you a chance to, and because you've done improv, you're so comfortable, I think, doing characters like that. And
yes, exactly. I have no objection to suddenly just turning and going, "Oh, Deirdre, what are you doing over there in the corner? No, come over here, darling."
I loved your Scottish accent, which is fantastic.
"Hey, pal, what you doing? Can you buy me? I want to buy a hat, please. How much is that?" Oh, that was terrible, that last bit. Anyway, so I use silly, explicit characters like that a lot, and so when I'm doing those, I try to physically alter myself quite a lot to make that look funnier and make it more obvious that I'm not being myself, because initial criticisms for me were that I didn't make it very clear when I was switching between myself and between my characters. And so that sort of made people go, "Oh, what is he doing? This is very confusing."
That's interesting that you say switching between your characters, because it's you as, it feels like it's you as yourself, and you are putting on characters consciously rather than coming on and being a character for the whole performance.
Yes, I'm picking and choosing them when they're needed.
Do you not feel vulnerable though on stage, as yourself? Do you not feel scared?
A little bit, but then I don't really see there being an alternative, I suppose. I feel like going on and being a character, for me, there'd be a certain disconnect or something. When I'm going on stage doing stand-up because I want to connect to the audience and I want to be myself.
Yeah.
Because otherwise it's more similar to acting, where you go on a stage and you're trying to perform a story, and then the audience might enjoy it, but it's in a very disconnected way. Whereas with the stand-up, I want it to be Jaya is talking to us, and we are not necessarily talking back to Jaya.
Yeah,
and there's a link, and then so that when I come off afterwards, people aren't just going, "Oh, you're brilliant." They want to chat to me instead,
Yeah, I think it also helps that you, and I did the same. We performed to people who we know. We performed on campus around uni with performing arts people and people that we personally know. So they know who Jaya is. So it's quite nice for them to see Jaya on stage.
Yes, although that is sort of a context-specific feature to being at Royal Holloway, because obviously I've graduated now and soon had
Yep.
to go into the real world,
Out into
where
the big scary world.
most audiences will
Strangers.
most audiences will not know who I am off the bat, and so it's quite important to not rely on that element of everyone knows Jaya, and so he's on a stage and yeah.
Well, maybe then, I mean, that does feed into character, because maybe you need to, if you see, I mean, you say you've been relying on people knowing that you are Jaya.
No, I wasn't
Maybe
saying I
you need to-
was relying on it, but I shouldn't rely on it.
Yeah, well, exactly. And I think that maybe when you do talk to strangers in the audience, maybe try and work on getting the Jaya character across.
Yes, quite possibly I maybe need to work on the persona of myself in order to express that to people, because meeting someone, if you already know someone and they're performing stand-up to you, it's very different from if that's your first window into meeting them, I suppose.
Yeah. Yeah, I've said this before in an earlier episode, but I find it so strange to be performing stand-up, because I'll talk about that later, but I'm so character heavy in a sense that afterwards, when people come and talk to me, it's really strange to for them to see me and be kind of like surprised as that I'm not the character that I portray on stage.
All right, well, on that point, we'll hold that thought after that discussion about myself, and we will leave you with another song from it before we start talking about Ned's
And what an
personas.
amazing song it is, the beautiful Life on Mars by David Bowie.
And if I press the right button...
There we go.
Hello, and welcome back.
We had to cut Life on Mars, the freaky little Bowie piano bit, but that's all right. We can cope without.
You've got a 20-second outro instead. Yes, so welcome back to No Laughing Matter with Jaya and Ned, and we are talking about onstage personas and characters in comedy. And we are just about to discuss Ned's
Yeah, we just
onstage
talked
personas.
about Jaya's kind of idea of persona. We kind of concluded that he likes to be himself generally on stage. I'm kind of the opposite. Whilst I'm not a character comedian, whilst I don't like wear costume and, well, I do sort of wear, but whilst I don't kind of actively pretend to be someone else, I think I play on stage an exaggerated version of myself. Like, I try to be more arrogant and more stupid and more pretentious. I mean,
Yes, to explain, Ned often comes on stage wearing things like waistcoats and ties or
Yes.
suit jackets.
which I used to do quite a lot in real life. I don't do as much, but it's definitely something which has stayed with the persona.
He wears things like that and generally comes across as a sort of semi-extremist left-winger, would you
Yes.
say? Yes.
Yeah, well, I think the word to describe him would be champagne socialist. Like the quite white middle class, doesn't realise how privileged he is, but's willing to be very outspoken about his opinions.
That someone put a piano in front of him and he started singing. Yeah, so that's the sort of thing you do, and it's not as true to you in real life.
No, I think it comes from me having a sense of humor about myself, and in real life, I am, and I do it with a sense of irony. I am slightly pretentious. I am slightly not cocky, but for humor's sake. And I think that those elements of myself, which I think, oh, that's stupid, or I'm such an idiot, I take and make so obvious on stage that people can look at him and go, oh God, he's such an idiot.
Yes, well, this is an interesting comparison point between the two of us that Ned was saying in the break earlier, that if I went on stage and said something atrocious during my stand-up, something that was considered incredibly offensive, or even just potentially offensive, it could potentially ruin the whole mood of my set and maybe
It would be
upset
quite
people
jarring.
and reflect on me. Yeah, it would be quite jarring. Whereas because Ned is in a more explicit persona or character, he is able to say certain things that I might not.
Yes. Yeah. I also, this is another thing that I've always had an issue with. It goes a little bit back to offense that we talked about earlier. When a comedian says something that's offensive or says something that's morally reprehensible, and they say an actively immoral thing, people immediately jump down their throat and say, I can't believe he'd say that. But, I mean, it's interesting that Jaya doesn't feel the same, but I've always kind of assumed that all comedians operate on a persona basis. So when they say that, you're not supposed to look at the comedian themselves and say, oh, you're so terrible because you said that. You should look at the character and say, oh, isn't he a bad person? Isn't that funny that someone can be that awful? That we can laugh at him because he's such an idiot and says these stupid, horrible things.
I think that only works on the assumption that every comedian is in fact putting on a persona, though, because otherwise then people that weren't would be in a position to get away with saying stuff like that and then go, oh, well, hang on a second, you can't tell me off for saying that. Like, it's just a character, isn't it?
Stuart Lee, who's are you familiar with Stuart Lee?
Yes, I know Stuart Lee.
Wonderful comedian and one of my comedy heroes. My persona is, I think I'm definitely influenced by him, and I'd like to, obviously I'd like to be an individual and do my own thing, but he plays the similar, quite like white middle class, overprivileged champagne socialist. And whenever he talks about himself in interviews, he always refers to the character on stage in the third person. Like he says, oh, I don't think he would do that, or he's a bit like this. And I think that's really interesting because no one considers him a character comedian. But in his own mind, he considers the character he portrays to be a character. And I feel slightly similarly because I wouldn't want, if people were to come and judge me truthfully and honestly based on how I act on stage, I wouldn't be particularly comfortable with that because I know that he's not a massively nice person generally.
See, I'm so ragingly socially insecure that I almost assume that everyone there is going to judge me as me, regardless of whether I put on a character or not. So I suppose I try and come across as the most genuine and affable version of myself that I can.
Yes.
Almost just as a sort of logical flight or fight response type thing to a degree. That's painted me in a slightly more pathetic light than is actually true. I'm not terrified of human beings, but I think there is some level of truth in that. I think that I wouldn't feel comfortable necessarily, even as a character, going on and saying a load of atrocious things.
Yeah, but and maybe this is, this is going to sound awful if it's not, but I was going to say you play the underdog. But if that means that you are in real life an underdog, I'm not even going to... That could be very insulting.
Explain and expand, Ned, please.
But, when you go on stage, you're the kind of apologetic, and we spoke about this with the episode with Abby. You always said, oh, I'm so apologetic, I like to apologise just for being there. And I was saying people immediately are drawn to that character. They think, this is a person who's clearly quite, awkward and sad, and you want to like him. So you immediately draw people's...
Yeah.
Empathy.
I suppose I combine
sympathy, more like.
I tried to combine a level of likability with enough low status that rather than look at me as pitiful, people look at me as endearing. That's the word I get given a lot of the time is, oh, you seem very approachable.
I always use affable to describe you as a person generally because you're very friend based, which I think feeds into the act definitely.
Darling, stop.
Oh, this is what we do. We just come on here and give each other compliments.
So after you've listened to that slightly sickeningly saccharine exchange of words, we're
real mean people in real life. Arr.
We're going to give you another song. This is "Strangers in the Night" by Frank Sinatra.
A real classic.
Goodbye, Frank Sinatra.
What a great
Hello,
man.
us. Welcome back to...
Three legends right there. You, me, and Frank Sinatra.
Indeed. We are definitely on a comparable level. Welcome back to No Laughing Matter.
Yep.
So we've talked about ourselves for far too long, and you're probably sick of it. So we're going to talk... we're going to go on to a game, actually.
Yes, we're going to go on to... Oh, isn't that interesting? A game where we try and get interesting facts and out-interest each other.
Yes. So, would you like to go first this time?
I would. I've got a really fun one. Well, I say fun, actually. It's quite morbid, but it's great. This is... France was still executing people by guillotine when Star Wars A New Hope was released in cinemas.
Wow.
I know.
That's quite fun.
I know.
Well, I mean, it's horrible.
That's quite fun.
It's not fun at all.
That's wacky and great.
Those zany French people.
But isn't that mad? I thought they stopped using guillotine after the French Revolution,
yes.
Which I assume probably wasn't around the same time as the release of Star Wars: A New Hope.
To be honest, I'm surprised that capital punishment was even in France at that time, let alone the fact that we're using such an archaic method of execution.
By the way, if anyone, I'm fairly certain, I did a little bit of research and I'm fairly certain that was true. If anyone knows for a fact that any of these facts aren't true, do please tweet in and tell us, because that would be very embarrassing. I do think that one is true, though. I did look it up.
A guillotine is a fascinating set piece, though. It's a very striking image.
Oh, I think, it's one of those things which definitely was created mostly for like fear factor because it's so big and scary.
Yeah, it probably doesn't need to drop from as high as it does to
Yeah.
succeed. Anyway, my fact is an interesting one, as is the title of the game. The surface area of Russia, the country, is bigger than the surface area of Pluto,
Good
the
Lord.
planet.
Good Lord.
Yes, that is right. There is a country
Wow.
on Earth that is bigger than a planet.
There's a really lovely song by a musical comedian called Jonathan Coulton called "You're My Moon," which is about Pluto, where there's the whole thing about people saying feeling sorry for Pluto for being being officially made not a planet.
Dwarf planet is its new term.
Yeah. There's a fun fact about Pluto is one of its moons. They're so similarly sized that they orbit around each other. So he did this song, which was a love letter from the moon to Pluto. And it's called "You're My Moon." It's called "I'm Your Moon" by Jonathan Coulton. Look it up, and it makes me cry. It's so sad, but it's so beautiful.
That's lovely. That is a lovely little idea. They're just eternally looking at each other, but sort of swirling around each other.
Yes.
Sounds a bit like sort of when you meet someone you fancy, but you're hideously drunk and you're trying to dance with them,
You're just swirling around them.
and you can't actually quite make contact. Anyway, so wasn't that
Restraining orders for you.
wasn't that interesting?
It was.
So we will now move on to talking about character comics and potentially why they are not so positively looked upon.
Yeah. I mean, in the comedy world, I've had I've had about a year's but still limited experience in like the British comedy world in London, and on the internet generally in comedy communities, musical comedians, character comedians, and like prop comics, like physical comedians, generally are looked down upon. I think it's that they're not considered as pure a form of as comedy. I completely hate that because I think that you should use anything available to you, all of your skills to be funny if you're going to be a comedian.
Yes, I mean, in my opinion, the art of stand-up is nothing to do with your ability to tell jokes or anything like that. It really is just the ability to stand in front of people and entertain them. And that can be achieved in so many different ways. It's obscene. I've seen people just come on stage and sing a bunch of nonsense songs, but do it completely seriously and never let on for a second like, oh, we're being strange. Like, for all intents and purposes, they were just being weirdos.
Let's try and keep it generally to... We're going to do a Sean musical comedy. Let's try and keep it to a character comedy.
Yes, no, this is about their characters, less to do with the music.
Okay, yeah, go on.
And they did that, and it was 2 or 3 minutes of just awkward sort of, okay, what on earth is their shtick? And then when everyone realised, oh, this just is their shtick, and they're just having fun being that confident in it, it was really funny, actually. It wasn't something I would have thought I would have liked. It seemed a little bit sort of just silly and pretentious, but I actually did really enjoy it.
Yeah, well, that sounds fantastic. I mean, there's... With, like, full-on... We've spoken about persona, but we haven't really talked about full-on character comedy. And there are people, I mean, off the top of your head, I can name, like, Dame Edna, people like that. Keith Lemon is another one.
Keith Lemon, what is it, Mrs. Brown?
Well, Mrs. Brown is more a character used for...
A sitcom?
He's acting as that character.
I thought that he used that in some other scenarios. I must have been mistaken.
Possibly. I don't really know a lot about it. But there's a weird thing.
Harry Hill, to a degree.
Yeah, he's actually Harry Hall. Oh my God, one letter out of place. How scary.
Mental.
But yeah, there's also around character comedy, there's a weird sense of spirituality a lot of the time. It's a bit like, I don't know if anyone's familiar with mask work in theatre, but the fact that there's all these rules, like when you put on a mask, you have to do it very slowly, and you can't just chuck it straight on. You have to do there's all rituals surrounding it. There's lots of hardcore character comedians take it all very seriously and say you're not allowed to you're not allowed to be in character unless you've like put on the costume, and if you are in character you have to stay in character until you actively decide. It's taken very seriously by a lot of people.
Well, comedy is after all a very serious business.
Yes.
We might
it's
touch...
no laughing matter, one might say.
Haha. We might touch on that a bit later, but for now we're going to leave you with another song. This is Be Prepared from The Lion King.
It's a great playlist today.
Sung by everyone's favourite musical artist, Scar. So, here we go. Apologies for the quietude of that song at the beginning. Welcome back to No Laughing Matter. And while we were listening to that song, I remembered that I have a fun fact as well about that. There's a moment, Jeremy Irons, the actor that played Scar, sings quite a lot of that song. But then, as it gets to its crescendo and he starts really belting it, he did that in rehearsals and completely and utterly destroyed his voice. He did, yes. And so actually, halfway through, the singer switches. And someone else completes the song for him. I can't remember who it was specifically.
That's very interesting job. I'm afraid we're not currently doing Oh, Isn't That Interesting?
No,
and
but
that was cheating, and you are going to be disqualified, I'm afraid.
It was topical and relevant.
that was fun. I didn't know that. That's very interesting. I always think it's interesting in musicals how they who sings the actual songs, and I find it quite funny in poor quality musicals when you can so tell that it's someone else singing compared to who's talking.
Yes, that's always awkward, isn't it? a lot of there are a lot of musicals like that. But we're not talking about musicals.
No,
we're talking about comedy, as we always do. Not that your musicals and your comedy can't overlap.
Yes.
See Book of Mormon.
Avenue Q.
And others. But yes, we were just talking about how masks and characters, and how some actors and comedians view their characters as somewhat sacred. In fact, my special project for university, my dissertation equivalent, was actually on mask work, which I completed with the wonderful Jake Mills. And
Shout out.
Another shout out, why not? It's very interesting. It's done by Keith Johnston, and it's about sort of you put on a mask and there's almost spirits inside every mask that possesses you.
Is this the bloke who wrote that book, Impro?
Yes, Impro by Keith Johnston. Many people refer to it as the Bible of improvisation. However, the fifth chapter, which is Mask and Trance, is universally just trashed and binned by most critics as a load of rubbish. So currently...
But, I mean, you say you used to bin it as a load of rubbish, or you say it is universally binned as a load of rubbish. Do you think that the same thing applies to these comedians who will sit backstage in character and refuse to talk to people out of character and will take it very seriously?
Well, it's very easy, just like it was in the playground, to bully the people that are different, isn't it?
Yeah. And it's fun as well.
No, it isn't.
I couldn't resist.
We do not condone bullying.
No, just a little bit.
But it's very easy. I mean, it's the same thing with mimes. A lot of people just think that traditional mimes are just silly these days and that they shouldn't really be around anymore.
But a mime, I mean, they say, okay, now I'm working and I'm a mime and I'm going to do my thing, that's my art, I'm going to do that. But I don't think you could ever really describe I don't know enough about mime, to be honest, but I don't think you could ever really describe a mime as like a method actor in the same way that, like, there's, Daniel Day-Lewis.
Yes.
Like who famously played all these roles and refused to break character through the entirety of filming, even when he was at home. I think that's the kind of thing that a lot of character comedians aspire to, that sort of dedication to the role. It is like Stanislavski-esque method acting.
Yes. And it's a very interesting one because there have been countless examples of that being immensely psychologically unhealthy. For example, I'm being very culturally ignorant. The name escapes me, but the man that played the Joker in one of the most recent Batman films. Yes.
Although I think that's rubbish that it was because of his character. There's lots of theories about that, but I think that's just a slightly insensitive romanticization of depression.
Well, fair enough. That's example defunct, but
no, it's fine. There's the bloke who played Hamlet famously and kept imagining his dad in the role of Hamlet's father. And on the last night, he saw his father and he broke down, had a mental breakdown, went to a hospital.
Yes, exactly. And I have heard that story. The show had to go on with a new actor, didn't it?
Yeah, I believe so.
Yes.
It's one of those old folk tales that's thrown around theatres.
Don't say Macbeth in a theatre.
The Scottish play.
Or lightning will strike you down. Yes, there's many examples of that, but then obviously watching these people that play these characters, there's plenty of moments where it's incredibly impressive.
Oh, yeah. I mean, watching Daniel Day-Lewis perform, maybe he's just very talented, or maybe it really pays off because he is fantastic. And I think a lot of these character comedians, they play the characters so well and you forget that they're an actor, which is maybe what they're aiming for with all that method acting.
And there's definitely, yes, they have a level of artistic integrity with that opinion, whereas I think I'm almost slightly scared to give myself up to that.
How do you mean?
I like to. I like to blend the real life and performance in the way that I do. I want to come off stage and that not have been a completely separate entity to be observed as an art piece, but more of a social interaction than necessarily a performance.
Yeah,
if that
okay.
makes sense.
I'm actually I forgot to mention this, thinking of doing character comedy and getting into it because I have a song which I'm not sure if you've heard.
I have.
The one, I'm not going to say the title because I'm not sure if it's okay or if it's
isn't.
allowed. It's basically a satire of the Trump voter, Islamophobia, racist person, and based on kind of the idea of American country singing. And the way I do it, I created a character called Freedom McGee or something. I can't remember, but I can't want to come on in the character. And I never treated it as being like a big sacred thing. It was just me playing a character because it was funny and putting on an accent because it was funny. But I never took it further than that.
No.
But maybe it's an option. Maybe there are character comedians you would benefit from that.
Indeed. Unfortunately, we're going to have to wrap up the conversation there. It's not the end of the show. We've got time for one more game, which is called Terrible Jokes for Terrible People.
Yes.
In which, over the course of this next song, we will both have to write a completely original piece of stand-up on topics of the other's choosing. So for Ned today, I'm going to say you have to write a piece of stand-up on mushrooms.
Okay, mushrooms, fantastic. And I'm going to say that Jaya has to write a piece about hip-hop.
Lovely. Okay. I know nothing about hip-hop. We'll see how that goes. So, over the course of this next song, the National Express, we will be writing these jokes and telling them to you afterwards. We will see you on the other side.
Take the National Express when your life's in a mess. It'll make you smile. All human life is here, from the feeble old deer to the screaming child. From the student who knows that to have one of those would be suicide. To the family man, manhandling the pram with paternal pride. And everybody sings, yeah, all right, we're going where the air is free. On the National Express, there's a jolly hostess selling crisps and tea. She'll provide you with drinks and theatrical winks for a sky-high fee. Mini skirts were in style when she danced down the aisle back in '63. But it's hard to get by when your arse is the size of a small country. And everybody sings, yeah, all right, we're going where the air is tomorrow belongs to me.
When you're sad and feeling blue, with nothing better to do, don't just sit there feeling stressed. Take a trip.
The National Express. On the National Express. Let's go.
Hello, we're back. We have 2 minutes left of showtime to tell these jokes to you. So here's my joke about hip-hop. It's more of a story. As we all know, hip-hop originated in a pond with frogs. Unfortunately, though, they only had the hop. Frogs, lacking the power they wanted, had to venture elsewhere to find the other half to their music, the yin to their yang. They performed their hop to a select group of humans one day, who in response to the hop started swinging their hips, and so hip-hop was born. So remember, next time you're bopping along to your favourite tune while talking bad about frogs to your friends, that if it wasn't for their half of the bargain, you wouldn't have had it at all.
That was so bad, I love it.
Off you go.
Okay, this is I had mushrooms, and this is I have several friends called Gus. I have an attractive and charismatic friend called Sexy Gus, an unintelligent and annoying friend called Stupid Gus, and an entertaining and mushroom-like friend called Fun Gus. Thank you very much.
Lovely. We've been Ned and Jaya. This has been No Laughing Matter, and we will leave you with one of my favourite songs of all time, Come On Eileen by the Dexys Midnight Runners. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.